Hello, I'm Jeffficus. The horde-based co-op FPS Warhammer 40,000 Darktide isn't the most popular live service game out there, but I want to set the record straight. Darktide isn't a bad game, but it's not really a great game either. I think that Darktide is a good game, but depending on the player, that could mean that the game is good enough, or it could mean that it's just a good game. The main problem with this game is that it was released after Vermintide 2, and the community built around the game anticipated that Fatshark would have learned from the mistakes it made in Vermintide, and then apply those lessons to its development of Darktide. None of us anticipated for Darktide to launch with optimization issues, a terrible crafting system, and significantly less class variety than Vermintide. A year and a half after launch, Fatshark has addressed many of these issues, but the game is still far from perfect. I believe that 1 year is a sufficient enough grace period for a game to be fixed after it has already launched. As such, this is my review of Warhammer 40,000 Darktide, all of the good that the game has to offer, and the bad.
We basically just spawn stuff until you die.
At the very core of Darktide is its cooperative first-person shooter gameplay, which I would describe as the most immersive Warhammer 40k experience in the industry. In fact, even if you aren't a fan of Warhammer, Darktide really just gets your adrenaline pumping in the best way possible. And if you are a Warhammer fan, Darktide is one of the most played Warhammer 40k games for a reason. This game does an amazing job of mixing brutal melee combat with fluid first-person shooting. On the surface, combat appears very simple, but as you dive into the game, it gets pleasantly complex. It's satisfying to learn how to deal with each and every type of enemy, and it's equally satisfying to develop a mastery over your class. Speaking of classes, each player is able to choose one of 4 that each offer their own unique playstyles and flavor. These classes are the Ogryn, the Psyker, the Veteran, and the Zealot. The Ogryn is a tanky brute that focuses on a slower playstyle that rewards controlling enemies with heavy-hitting attacks or copious amounts of gunfire. The Psyker is a space wizard built for people who love to have a strategic, jack-of-all-trades type character with an emphasis on managing resources. The Veteran is a ranged specialist that caters to a more traditional FPS-oriented player as it favors people with better aim and reaction speed. And last but not least, the Zealot is a melee fanatic that also leans into a faster playstyle that rewards quick reaction speed, but is focused on timing melee attacks, spacing, blocking, and even parrying in some cases. Once you pick your class and get going, Darktide features a straightforward progression system where you get noticeably stronger the more you play. As you level up, you unlock talents that help you lean into the playstyle of your choosing, and you start to collect a variety of weapons that define how you tackle certain challenges in-game. Speaking of challenges, the game presents a fair difficulty for newer players, slowly ramping up in intensity as you get more comfortable with the game's controls and its combat. As you progress your character and make your way into the endgame, you're rewarded with gear that enhances your gameplay even further. This gear can be altered through the game's crafting system, creating a gameplay loop that encourages you to dive into harder difficulty missions to collect crafting materials in order to shape the perfect items for your playstyle. All of this culminates in the game's pinnacle activity, the Auric Maelstrom mission. This mission slams several modifiers together to provide the ultimate test of your game knowledge and skill. And because of the live service nature of the game, more content has been added to the game since its launch to include new maps, weapons, and a new boss fight that might be the best boss gauntlet that Fatshark has created so far. More content is planned to be released in the future, and I'm sure that this game will be updated for years to come, as it has a cosmetic microtransaction store that keeps the game funded. If Darktide's gameplay is the foundation that the game is built on, then it has a very solid foundation, and for a lot of you, that's going to be good enough. But for the rest of you, let's talk about some of the things that the game doesn't get right. Unfortunately, all of the things that make the game great are held back by bad development decisions and contentious supporting systems that prevent the game from reaching an audience beyond its most dedicated and addicted player base. Even after 1 year of development, the game is still littered with bugs such as chat always being disabled for seemingly no reason, or getting thrown out of the map with no ability to return to the mission. Patches after the Carnival update have been released with the intention of fixing these bugs, but have actually resulted in breaking other aspects of the game, some of which required more hotfixes to resolve. Additionally, Darktide doesn't offer any sort of single player like its predecessor, Vermintide 2. You can set your matchmaking settings to private, but this won't actually allow you to enter a mission. You still need a mod in order to truly play by yourself. And even with the true solo mod, you aren't able to do things like skip to the Carnac Twins boss fight in the Orthus offensive special assignment. You need another player present in order to use the shortcut because it's not part of the game's original design. This isn't something that was accounted for. Next, the game's progression system comes to a screeching halt after you reach level 30, as any further progress is heavily dictated by RNG systems. In order to collect good gear, you have to engage with the game's crafting system, which involves buying gear with randomly rolled stats and then upgrading that gear using crafting currency that you earn from missions. You're even able to surrender a weapon to earn its blessing if you haven't collected it yet, which will allow you to place the blessing onto another weapon of the same type later. Where this system stumbles is the RNG nature of upgrading weapons. When you upgrade a weapon, you don't choose which perks or blessings appear on the weapon, it's random. The system has built-in forgiveness in that on any weapon you can replace 2 of 4 of any of its perks or blessings, allowing you to partially customize the weapon's overall role. This will allow you to quickly get a good roll on a weapon, which is going to suit your needs and any activity that the game is going to throw at you, but unless you're lucky, this will prevent you from getting the perfect roll for a very long time. The entire crafting system is more like a gambling system, and it actually makes the game's gear progression more comparable to that of a looter shooter, like Destiny 2. After hitting level 30 and grinding out a good set of gear, you're eventually going to step into Auric Maelstrom difficulty, and as a newcomer, it's probably going to be a little difficult for you. This is actually a good thing, but for the players who have already devoted hundreds or thousands of hours of gameplay to this genre, only one Auric Maelstrom modifier presents a challenging wildcard that you have to deal with, and that's the 3-Veg, also known as the Nurgle Blessed Monstrous Shock Troop Gauntlet modifier. This leaves veteran players in an awkward position when they get to the endgame. If you've managed to earn perfectly rolled gear and you're dominating the Auric Maelstrom every time it refreshes, then what's next? Well, nothing. Right now, veteran players don't really have a good reason to log into the game because things just aren't challenging enough and there's nothing meaningful to grind for. I'm the kind of person who is intrinsically motivated to just get better at a game, and I'll use off-meta weapons or builds just because I think they're cool or fun, but there's a limit on how many challenge runs I can do before getting bored of a game. Additionally, as of March 2024, Fatshark has stated that they plan to address many of the game's weaknesses, but what is perplexing to me is the rate at which future updates will be released. This is important because other games like Helldivers and Deep Rock Galactic that release better content faster than Darktide will eventually cannibalize it to the point where even when a good update is released for this game, people won't be interested enough to come back. I don't mind if Fatshark has a slower release schedule, but if this is going to be the case, then each update needs to really pack a punch that is going to make me want to spend hundreds or thousands of more hours on the game. I'd also like to point out that Fatshark wouldn't have a cosmetic microtransaction shop if it wasn't making them good money. They wouldn't be rotating skins out of the shop if the FOMO they were employing wasn't making them good money. So theoretically, if they're making more money now than they were in Vermintide 2, how come they aren't hiring more people to work on the game? According to their LinkedIn, they're still hovering at around 180 employees and have been for a while now. Is all that extra money that they're earning going to Tencent or another project? Is management so terrible that they're churning through developers? Are the developers that they have properly motivated with competitive salaries? Whatever the reason is, I want them to get their together sooner rather than later so that I can continue to feed my own addiction to the game. At the end of the day, Darktide is a good game that has the potential of becoming a great game. It has great gameplay, which is what matters the most, but even after a year, many of the frustrations felt at launch from both the casual and hardcore communities haven't been addressed. Oh, and Fatshark needs to send someone to negotiate with Microsoft and Sony about releasing Darktide onto the PlayStation 5. People can already play Vermintide 2 on Sony consoles, so just let them play Darktide as well. This has been Jefficus. I'll see you in-game.